Hi, Paul here. Today I want to talk to you, show you some more social media clips and links and articles, things of that sort that are along the lines of the conversation began in the last episode or two of the YouTube videos podcast. I should mention, by the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I have been making these podcast episodes as YouTube videos. So I'm just doing the video thing and then taking the audio and putting that onto the podcast. So if you're wondering why I'm referencing something that you can't see, that's the reason why. So you're welcome to go find it on YouTube. It's just under my name, Paul Trimble. And you can listen to it in podcast. You can watch a video, whatever you want. It's not, looking at my face talking isn't particularly exciting for the video part. So if you don't care about that and you don't miss too much on seeing things that I'm referring to visually, then podcast is just fine. Either way, just thought I should mention it. Anyway, was thinking from the last episode, we talked about some of the movement in recent years as far as what's kind of considered acceptable dialogue and views to have and views to say out loud, and basically experience some sort of social support where you're not out of bounds. We talked about the Overton window and where what's considered acceptable or believable changes over time. And so where the window goes changes with time, and what was out of bounds 5 years ago can be quite inbounds today. And I think that's happened with some things that are not necessarily the most healthful. And so we talked through examples, not for the purpose of just getting ourselves worked up for outrage or, the kind of clickbaity type stuff. Although I did show you some things like that probably do serve that purpose. But just looking at them as anecdotes or little data points that are examples, because I see these things every day. But it's hard to point to because it's like it's easy and hard to point to. Because it's easy because there's tens of thousands of examples, but you could easily dismiss each one of the examples as not part of a pattern. Whereas my thinking is that it's absolutely part of a pattern, and it's traceable and trackable. So anyway, I mentioned in that one that I do think that this new way of thinking that's become more and more mainstream, more and more within the Overton window, is it comes from somewhere. It's not simply universally seen as progress towards what we should all be: modern, better, more tolerant, more accepting, more less superstitious and judgmental, and all of these things. There's a narrative. That's what we're doing with this movement, but that narrative can be questioned. And along with the idea that it's just inevitable progress that we're naturally doing, because that's what humans do, we just inevitably and naturally progress, that everything in that direction is good by definition and by default, that many of these thoughts and this way of thinking, in addition to being challengeable, that maybe it's not all good, it also doesn't just come from nowhere. It also isn't just floating goodness that we are finding our way towards. That this way of thinking does come from somewhere. And even some of the troubling aspects that I think are not good, they do come from somewhere. Anyway, before getting into the where does it come from, I wanted to unpack a little more and try to describe the trend that I am referencing when I say these things. So you could use different terminology for it, and I don't think the terminology is the most important thing. I think the word that's caught on the most in the last 5 years is woke. You'll hear woke thinking or woke ideology or woke whatever. Progressive sometimes is the alternative word used, and that's fine. You can use them or not like them or whatever. As with any words, they can easily be abused or used so loosely that they don't mean anything. But I'm going to use it because I think it's the most useful word right now. And in my opinion, the way that this thinking is working is as a quasi-religion, and it's not identified as a religion, but it has many of the marks of a religion, and most importantly, the driving force, the explanatory power in terms of, hey, I'll help you see what is going on in the world in a way that gives you orientation, it gives you sort of some hooks to grab onto to understand things, and also gives you a way of feeling in touch with what is good, what is right, what is noble, and orienting yourself towards that. It provides people with that sense of important, of a cause to fight for, of ideals to represent and uphold, all of that, and understandably so. So I'm just calling it woke quasi religion because that's the best I can attempt to name it right now. So I want to talk about 10 marks of this quasi religion and give some examples. The examples, again, are not really in and of themselves super important. They're just my attempt to grab something that seems to reflect what I'm seeing in 1,000 places. But you got to use some example, right? If you want to help kind of paint the picture. So number one would be games with words. And I've alluded to this in previous episodes, previous videos or podcast episodes. But games with words, and what I mean when I say games with words is you'll note that in many respects there are vast asymmetries in what can easily be talked about. So I use the example of men versus women type things, which is one of many hot button topics, it feels like, in the cultural sphere right now. And I was looking at an article. I won't share it on here because it's too detailed and meaty, but just the title is enough to kind of give us something to go off of. It's from The Economist, and it's how to think about the manosphere. And here, manosphere is referring to a cluster of podcasters and YouTube people, things like this, that are influencing men. And the thought is that these are mostly negative, and these people attempting to help men are actually hurting men, and more importantly, hurting women, because they're influencing men to not have favorable views towards women. They're indulging men's already not favorable view towards women. They're inciting misogyny. They're hotbeds of toxic masculinity. All these things. So if you dabble in the social media verse at all, in the general culture, this shouldn't be completely new to you. You've probably seen and picked up tidbits here and there if you're not engrossed in it completely. But the point is, it's very easy to talk about those things because we use words for them. And the words for the analogous thing, when the roles are reversed, really either don't exist or are so lightly used that they almost might as well not exist. So there is no womanosphere. Does that mean there are not women posting articles and videos that are condemnatory and inflame women's negative views of men or indulge their already negative views of men? Of course there are. There are many, and I've even shown you an example. There's countless examples, but it's not even a thing to talk about the womanosphere. And then the article that I just mentioned, it asks the question something like, is this just silly or is it cruel and evil or something like that? And there's people saying, their responses to that question. But there's clearly a big chunk of people within the comments section, presumably reflective of the population, who just, they agree, obviously, that this exists, that it's bad. And then if anybody tries to point out the thing that I just said, that, wait, aren't there women that are saying, equally condemnatory and negative and harmful things about men? And all kinds of reasons are given immediately why that's not the same, why it shouldn't be given a label. If women are doing that, it's justified, but if men are doing it, it's not. It's just completely asymmetrical. And people can make that case. Of course they can make it, but in my mind, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking these are not convincing arguments. There's just a total imbalance in the language itself. There is no toxic femininity. There can't be. Yeah, there can. But it feels uncomfortable to talk about it because we just are not comfortable thinking in those categories. It's okay for men to be the bad guys, but it's not really okay for women as a class to be the bad guys. We almost can't even say it because it's bad guys, right? Bad men. There's a lot more examples. I even think about the phrases I've heard in the last several years. Like, it was kind of popular, like the People have the shirt, the future is female. People would say the future is female. Imagine saying the future is male. The future is male. What a blood-curdling thing to say. Of course, you can say it for females, but you can't say it for males. The other one that was very popular is believe women. Just believe women. And if you flip that around and said believe men, of course, people would be immediately like, of course, no, don't believe men. That will put you in terrible situations and terrible danger, but believe women is okay. And you're talking about 50% of the population that we are either okay or not okay with condemning or upholding, supporting or opposing as a class. And I just don't see how that can be good. I totally get that there are asymmetries. I totally get that the history is complicated. I get all that. And yet I will still stand by, I think these are still games with words. They make the conversation worse, not better, harder, not easier. All right, the second one I'm going to mention is unequal scales. So this one kind of goes along with number one. It's not exactly the same, but just how things are judged differently depending on if you're talking about men or if you're talking about women. So, and this one I found an article that was, why are girls still falling behind in math in The Economist? And, apparently I'm just going to get pop-ups all over the place, so we won't look at that. But why are girls falling behind in math? And the article was about how girls in a particular age range in school had statistically performed somewhat lower than boys in math. Now, it mentions in the article that, I think, or implies, that the girls, were outperforming the boys in every other subject. Of course, it's well known that in our culture today, at least in the U.S. right now, girls are outperforming boys in just almost everything, academically, educationally, college enrollment rates, college graduation rates, the unemployment of recent college graduates, the general academic achievement of girls in school as a whole throughout the range of ages in school. So girls are like kicking the butt of boys across the board, except this thing. And so some of the commenters did point this out, like, wait, why aren't you? So it's a problem when the girls are behind the boys at anything. But if the girls are ahead of the boys in 95% of things, that actually is not a problem, that the boys are behind. And so there's just an incredible asymmetry in how these things are treated. So it really breaks down, maybe oversimplifying a little bit, but not too much, to say, if boys are underperforming, A, that is not a societal problem, and B, the fault for it is boys or men. If girls are falling behind in anything, A, it is a societal problem. It's some sort of collective, flaw or sin that we're all engaged in. It's a form of oppression or not meeting the human rights of girls. And the people at fault would be primarily men, like a male problem. This is another instance of oppression, of a patriarchal society. It's a male thing. So I would say that's clearly unequal scales. You could see this in a whole lot of other areas. If there's something where women seem to get the shorter end of the stick statistically, that can easily be painted as a societal ill, a problem, a form of oppression or a symptom of oppression. But there's obviously so many things that men fare worse at. I mean, you look at lifespan. If men live shorter on average than women, could that not be explained as some form of that things are harder for men, or some form of oppression, or some sort of whatever? We can do that with other demographics. We can do that with races and things like that. And that case gets made all the time. That if this group is shorter lifespan or worse health outcomes than others, that it's a form of discrimination, which it could be. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm only pointing out how asymmetrical the argument is. If you look at prison, I mean, I don't know, it's like 100 to 1 men to women. I don't think that's really a form of discrimination or oppression, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying nobody would make that case. But if there was something analogous that women were obviously on the short end of the stick, that case would be very, very easy to make and would be made for sure. You could look at all other sorts of things. I mean, there obviously have been oppression of women in the past and a lack of sufficient rights, all of that sort of thing. But it's also true to say that men got sent off to war and were killed and dismembered by the hundreds and thousands and all of these things. And it wasn't a form of discrimination. In fact, I just read this book, or I was reading this book. Oh, I put it over there. The Women. That's a popular book right now. It's written by a woman. It's about women that were in the Vietnam War as nurses. And it's a good book. It's a good writer. She's good. And a lot of people like it. I think probably more women read it than men. But I'm reading it. It's good. But it's interesting because in her explanation of writing the book, it was something like, well, I do think women can be heroes, and, men, and I'm totally paraphrasing, this is not what she said verbatim, but men have got their time, as heroes, war heroes, and, I thought it was worth, therefore, shining the spotlight on the women. And it's kind of funny because she has a point, and I have no problem with her writing this book. It's a good book. She's a good writer, all that. But I'm like, wow, the actual content of the book includes how horrible all the people coming back from Vietnam were treated, and how bad that was. And in her case, in the book, it focuses on the women because those are the main characters by design, which is fine. But if you think about what that means, is she's reflecting the reality of what happened to men, and the men's filled with like thousands of men. The book is filled with thousands of men getting destroyed, dismembered, brutally slain, killed, losing body parts. And so the reality is actually total atrocity for men. That's not the right word, but total tragedy for men. And her thinking of writing the book was, you know what, that's enough credit for men being war heroes. Wait, were they war heroes? In the book, there's a wall of honor of men going to war. And the one of the struggles of the protagonist is, well, I didn't get on the war hero wall. But in the book itself, it seems to acknowledge, like, wait, these men didn't get a hero's welcome at all. So you get to see there's like all these crazy asymmetries, and you could be forgiven for thinking, is that really right? Like, the men got too much credit as heroes, and the women of Vietnam did not get enough credit as heroes. And this book is kind of balancing things out a little bit. Again, I'm not having anything against the book. It's good. Go read it. But I'm just pointing out how uneven it can be. The other day I saw a show that was, a couple shows actually. One of them was like a prank thing, and it was staged, but this man had to say no to a woman proposing to him in the middle of a huge public forum baseball game. And all he was allowed to do was say no to her. And he does that, and eventually she leaves, heartbroken because she's an actor. And the whole stadium boos him. He boos him for saying no to marriage. And it's funny, it's mostly just funny. But you can imagine if the roles were reversed and a woman says no to a man, the woman doesn't get booed. Like, people might feel bad for the guy, but they're not going to unleash and boo him. And so there's just all these things. Like, it's clearly not the same. It is not the same from one to the next. The other example was a game show, and it was one of those things where everybody gets to move along unless people vote someone out. And this guy, he has to decide something that affects the whole group. He tries to do it in a way that's fair and balanced, and it gets nobody voted off. But one of the people that it influences feels carved out and singled out as a woman, and she's a black woman, so a woman and a black woman. And she calls upon her history and how this is how she's been treated. And so she is determined, and she says so, at least this is what she says, that she has been victimized and singled out. The guy that's made the decision, he's a black man. And And so she feels justified to vote him out. She gets her friends to vote out with her. And so they all vote him out on this basis, on this premise. Now, it's clear when you watch the show, like that's not what was happening. She wasn't getting singled out or the victim of, anti-woman or racism or something like that. But she gets to draw first blood and feel justified, like it was right, because she has to proactively defend herself against this threat. So these are just examples. There's a million more examples to give. I'm just saying they're on equal scales, clearly on the male-female thing, but I'm sure you could apply it to other things. So that's number 2. Number 3 is there's exactly one metric or barometer of goodness, and that is ultimate inclusion and acceptance of everything and everyone. That's the end-all and be-all of what it means to be a good person. So I found this cartoon, and maybe it's not going to load. No, it is going to load. Okay, so this guy likes to do biblically themed cartoons, but with the woke twist. So the woman caught in adultery, the real story. And this is from a scene in the Bible, of course. It's a picture of Jesus saying, "I don't condemn you," to a woman that was caught in adultery. And you've got the crowd around with stones that were considering to stone her. And, in the biblical account, Jesus would say to a person in this situation, like, "Go sin no more." So I don't condemn you. You're free to go, but go and sin no more. And this one, he puts a twist on it very intentionally, saying, "Oh no, Jesus is, really, it's Jesus got to say to the men, right? Like, go sin no more," for even thinking about condemning this woman. And so, could it be that they were in sin? Yeah, sure, okay. But the point is, he can't say it to the woman. He can't actually call anything sin a sin. That's the only sin. Calling sin as a sin is the only sin. So in this version of Jesus, he has to, the only thing he can call a sin is judgment, is making a distinction. So, obviously in the biblical account, you have both sides of the tension there. You have Jesus implying rebuke of the men and their motive or what they're going to do, and carving out protection for the woman and making space for her and making a path for her to forgiveness and to wholeness. But that has to be flattened out. We got to get it down to no, the only thing wrong in this, the only possible thing that you could put under the umbrella term of sin is any kind of distinguishing about action, activity, that sort of thing. And it's got to be anti-judgment. So that's number 3. Number 4 would be that anybody that would be put on the outs, of the periphery, by anybody's distinctions that they shouldn't be making, is a sacred victim. And so you have this elevation of anybody that would be judged by anything other than that one single metric, that flattening out metric. They are now they have a kind of a sacred status, and they're really elevated. And the example I found of this was, you've seen this a million times, but this is just one little example. This is Lena Dunham, and she's fighting for trans rights outside the U.S. Capitol. Trans liberation is our liberation. And you just kind of listen to the sacred and the religious tone of things here. She's writing and talking about the dangers and traumas trans people face today and how they're mistreated by the government. And she talks about her sibling, and that she had a sister that came out as trans, and now she calls the sister a brother. "When my sister came out as trans, I learned that I actually never had a sister at all, but a wise, funny, resilient, powerful, remarkable brother. I found that the greatest person you could have in your corner was not a sister, but it was a happy and embodied sibling, and just as divine, a trans person in your family. The experience of going through my brother's transition has been a profound gift to our family. We have laughed, we have cried, we have learned and relearned and laughed some more. She continued, quipping, you have not really lived until you've seen a 75-year-old white cis man standing in the middle of a party of trans girls trying to call an outfit a sleigh. He really tried, and we love him for that. Dunham spoke to the trans and non-binary community directly, telling them, we love you, we see you, we bow down to your charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. We are so lucky to love you and fight with you and for you and learn from you, and to ensure that our rights are inseparable from yours. Okay, so it just gives you a little bit of a sense there. There was another quote I was looking for, but I can't seem to find it right now, of how she describes him. But it talks about like them opening up and transforming reality into a new reality of life, love, hope. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the general tone of it. Very soaring language. She says, we bow down to your charisma, your greatness, your bravery. And just, by virtue of this identity that they have, this special status. And so that's a common thing, just that anybody that could be on the outskirts of any sort of judgment, by virtue of being on the potential outskirts as a consequence of that judgment, is now elevated to really a special status, like an elevated status. Number 5 that kind of goes along with that is that anybody who would be trying to hold out these distinctions, these judgment, these boundaries of what's inbounds and out of bounds, they are now the enemy. They are now like the chief enemy, the chief oppressor, somebody that their motive must be really bad. Either their intellect is really bad or their motive is really bad, because how can you not see the sacred status of these victims? So they kind of go together. It's like elevation of these guys and a demonization of anybody who would have a different viewpoint. And this is pretty common. I think I found an example of this too. It's really similar because this is Pedro Pascal, and he also has a trans sibling. And he's noted as being like a staunch supporter of this community of people, as it's called. And so actor Pedro Pascal is cementing himself as a high priest of trans allyship, saying, you inspire me. I think he's talking to trans people here at an event, and adding, you inspire fear in those who are afraid of being their true selves. I think that's the true threat, your joy and your radical bravery in living. And so this is a kind of a low-key example, but you see it there, both the element, the high elevation, like you are this very special, very highly elevated status, so brave, you're kind of above the rest of us. We have to look up to you to be inspired. And the only thing that could be influencing anybody to think differently is their fear or their cowardice. In some cases, you'll see like it's hatred or bigotry. It's got to be something like incredibly and insanely negative for anybody to disagree with this, with your special exalted status and our need to bow down to you and learn from you. It's really, it doesn't hit me the right way. I think it must feel very good and normal to the people kind of holding this viewpoint. So that's a pretty big divide right there. And you can take it for what you will. Number 6, the only sin is excluding or to making distinctions. And I guess I could show you that cartoon again about go and sin no more. It's the same thing. It's like the only real sin is judging others. So I won't belabor that because it's kind of similar to the last one. Number 7 is, I think people that have this viewpoint, especially the longer and deeper they go into it, and this is not the same for everybody, but many, many people, and I would say at this point it's definitely millions and millions, and some large minority of at least the United States, speaking for my culture, get really brittle and fragile and hostile, where it takes very little to set them off. It can be one word or one sentence or no words. Just the presence of a dissenting view. And I think, if I was to speculate a little, I think that people maybe sense deep down that the thing they're standing on is so shaky. It's so weak. It's so baseless that anybody at anything could take it down at any moment. And so there's a really a deep fragility, a deep bitterness, a deep hatred. And many people in this camp, they project the brittleness and the fragility and the hatred onto others. Not to say that doesn't exist in others, of course, but I do think there's a fair bit of projection that goes on here. But at this point, I've just seen like countless examples of people saying that, somebody comes into a situation where they're trying to make points that's dissenting with the woke ideology, and people are extremely upset that those people are there, that they're physically present, and that they're making any points, to the point of they feel quite entitled to curse them out, rebuke them, try to get them to leave, try to get them to shut up. They have no problem destroying their property. In many cases, they have no problem assaulting people. And, I'm touching on a later one, so I'll stop there. But where does that come from? What I'm trying to focus on is the fragility, the brittleness, the fear, the inability to tolerate a dissenting opinion. And I think I had a couple examples. I mean, these are honestly, I don't really enjoy showing them because I feel like it's kind of disturbing and it's not comfortable to watch. But I've seen so many of them now that it's like, this is something that really is happening. And it really is, I don't know. It's a little scary. I think I've lost the things that I thought I had saved. Okay, so that's good. Maybe I'll just skip it for that reason alone. But assault, you have people cussing people out, just won't let them say a single sentence, won't engage in a single word, and are assuming that they have the high ground. They're not willing to make points or go back and forth. Many times they can't listen at all. They can't listen. They can't engage a point. They are just very, very fragile. So maybe it's a good thing that I can't find those. But there's just a lot of examples. An unlimited supply, unfortunately. Number 8, I think that people coming from this viewpoint often have very self-contradictory viewpoints where if they just talk for a minute, 2 minutes, they're going to start contradicting their own statements and their own logic. There was a video I was watching and a guy was explaining how him and his wife and their kid, he's queer and he's part of a queer family, and he explains, he talks about his pronouns and what he has his kids call him. But it's a heterosexual family. It's literally a man, a woman, biological man, biological woman, looks like a man, looks like a woman. They have kids. And in the video, the guy's kind of reviewing, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I don't know. The guy reviewing might even be gay. I'm not sure. It's irrelevant to the review. You could see either type of person having this viewpoint that, why are you calling yourself this? It's like the words themselves do not have any meaning. So to use them it can literally mean whatever you want, which is sort of like the trope now with the what is a woman kind of thing, where people have women's marches and they're like strongly supportive of women and they're feminists, but there's no non-circular definition for them for what a woman is. So a woman, of course, they might say there's no binary, so a woman is just it's not just a matter of degrees anyway. They could say a woman is culturally constructed. It's not even a real thing that has binding meaning, inherent meaning. It's just whatever you want it to mean. So how do you defend women? How do you define women? How do you support women when it's that fluid? Oh, it's very fluid. You can go in and out of it. You can be 51% woman, 49% man. You can be 51% woman, 49% man. And then the next day, 100% man, 0% woman. It's that fluid. But also, it's very, very meaningful. It's like the deepest thing a person can be. It's so deep and meaningful and stable that you could need to switch your body parts by having them operated on to change your physicality, to match this thing that you really are deeply inside. Like, it is the essence of your identity. So your body has to match it, but also it is socially constructed. It has no particular meaning. It is not binary. And you know what? All of those things just can't coexist together. They can't really all be true at the same time in the same sense. So you can forgive people for being very skeptical and saying, yeah, that does not, words have no meaning at this point. It's so self-contradictory that there isn't a way out that's logical. And then people will say, well, all we're asking for is basic dignity. It's just a courtesy. Why do you care? You're making this a big deal. Oh, but if you don't agree, you're a hateful bigot. You're a horrible person, but you're the one making it a big deal and putting it in the forefront. But here's some parades. Here's these events. Here's a whole subculture. Here's a flag. This is the defining feature of many people's identity. You better be on board or you're a bad person. But also it's just being nice to people and accepting that they exist, and that's all they're asking for. One of those can be true. They can't both be true. Number 9, there's quick move to outrage and to extreme accusation. So I think I found an article here that I was going to show you. It's just one very tiny example, but pretty important and reflective. This is in the Atlantic, mainstream article, mainstream magazine, the liberal misinformation bubble about youth gender medicine, and just starts talking about, you know, the thing that you've maybe heard a million times if you've read about this, where children have to be granted transition surgeries if they have gender dysphoria, because if not, you are basically killing them, because you're putting them at increased risk of suicide. And then the article goes through and just sort of questions and basically dismantles that statistics and studies do not bear this out. And wow, like, what a power move to say, if you don't agree with me, and if you don't agree with this thing that is, I think almost everybody would have agreed is a very bad idea for the thousands of years before 5 years ago, that you are killing kids. That's a power move. That's a real power move. And I guess if you're right, then that's a big deal. But if you're wrong, I think fair to say you've lost all your credibility. The article goes into more details than that. I'm just giving you like the very bare bones thumbnail sketch. But, you know, the thing of, if you don't agree, you're hateful. If you don't agree, you're a bigot. If you don't agree, you're basically killing people. If you don't agree with the ideology of some of the trans topics, you are denying that these people exist. Or do you deny they exist? That's murderous. That's genocidal. The move to murderous, genocidal, hateful, that move is a power move. That's got a lot of nerve. You know, the old silence is violence equation. Silence is violence. Unless you agree, unless you post this profile on your Facebook, unless you post this slang, this phrase, not slang, but this phrase or this thought that synopsizes some aspect within this ideology, your silence is violence. You're a violent person. Okay, you're a pretty bad person, right? Then I guess you could cancel me. You could throw me in jail. You could take me out. You could punch me. You could kill me. I mean, that's where this can go. I just think, is that where we're going? Like, if that's not where the whole culture is going, is that where individuals are going? Could the whole culture go that way? It's a pretty serious thing. These things are pretty serious. And number 10, the last one, people with this ideology, I think the deeper they go into it, like any destructive and harmful ideology, and obviously this is just one, there's many, but this one has gained traction so quickly and in such large numbers that's why I'm focusing on it, can easily justify hostility and violence. Because if your stance and your identity can be collapsed into that of a fascist, a neo-Nazi, a Nazi, because you're whatever, because you're religious, or because you're white, or because you're conservative, or you're male, or you're cis, you're hetero, all these things that kind of collapse into each other symbolically, you can collapse them right onto Nazi, right? It's the next move. And anybody can punch a Nazi. You can take out a Nazi. You can abuse, you can torture, you can kill. And that's okay. That's okay. It actually means you're a good guy. You're a fighter for the resistance, the rebellion. You're in resistance to Nazis fighter. You see this. You hear it. I've seen it a lot. People just going in that direction more and more and more. And I know that there are just as real dangers on the other side. There is such a thing as Nazis and neo-Nazis. There is such a thing as fascists. There is such a thing as white supremacists. There are. The thing is, those things have names. They're identified. They're identifiable. It isn't that hard to say, I reject that. And I think you will see people who are of a more conservative mindset saying those things. But I don't know that the language even exists on this side of things. See, there's a tyranny that comes from strength, and we're going to strengthen the mainstream and the normal and the strong, and that's the flavor of fascism. That's the flavor of Nazism. And then there's a strength that comes from saying, well, we're just here to protect the innocent and the victims and the oppressed. And so when we take over and commit violence and seize power, it is righteous, man, because we are the right ones. We're just defending the defenseless and the victim. But tyranny comes about that way as well. It's not something that hasn't happened in history. It's happened on huge scales. That's left-handed tyranny. Left-handed tyranny exists. People can desire power in a left-handed manner. I'm nothing against left-handed. I'm left-handed, so I don't mean to paint you in a bad light. I'm just saying it's a different form of tyranny. It's a violence on the other side. It's from a different vantage point, but it's power, it's violence, it's tyranny nonetheless. And I think it's good to have names for these things. It's good to be able to diagnose and to see them for what they are. And I just think there's more and more people slipping in that direction. And I don't think that all of them are like fully engrossed in it or know what's happening. But I do think it's worth painting the picture as kind of starkly and clearly as possible so that you can see, and so you can be equipped and prepared and decide. I mean, you can be a feminist and not be this. You can believe that racism still exists or even exists in systemic and systematic ways and is a problem and still not be this. I'm not, just in case you're wondering, I'm not trying to say that anybody and everybody that has concerns along those lines is this. I'm not saying that. I know they're not. But I'm just saying this ideology does exist and can pull people into its gravity, into its vortex. You can be concerned for people on the margins, for people in the peripheral. You can be concerned that people get their basic human rights, that they be allowed to exist. All those things without falling in and being in the sway of this quasi-religion. You can do that. You can do that. You can see things that are at work in group dynamics that do have historically and do fall along group lines. Like that can happen. That does happen, is happening, without biting hook, line, and sinker this ideology, this quasi-religion. So I just want to be careful to carve out enough space to acknowledge, like, absolutely there are valid concerns along these lines. But the strengthened form of this entire ideology, where things have been flattened out, where distinctions cannot be made, where it's a sin to have an inside and an outside and a periphery, it's not it is not going to lead to good things, and it can lead to some very bad things. The men-women thing is just one example. I use it because it's kind of an easy entry point, but it is serious. And I just think, man, how sad. How sad if the dialogue and the tone just degenerates into men bellyaching and bemoaning women, and women bellyaching and bemoaning men, and just growing, increasing contempt and dismissiveness and hatred and all of those things. I mean, I almost can't imagine a more like dastardly plot that if there was a mastermind who could get these sort of cultural currents to come about, that they could come up with. That's a doozy. That can bring things to a halt real fast. And it's so unnecessary. I mean, men as a class, are men goofy and prone to folly and sometimes clueless and somewhat laughable? Yeah. Yeah, they are. We are. But also, can men be like glorious and worthy of praise and worthy of respect and noble and kind of incredible? Yeah. Can women be kind of silly sometimes and a little bit crazy and almost a little foolish, or like there's things to laugh at, or kind of notice and tease and make fun of? Yeah. All right, you be quiet. But are women also incredible and glorious and amazing and full of qualities that are just unimaginable from the standpoint of a man? Yeah, they are. Do they have superpowers that are just like unthinkable to the male mind? Yeah, they do. Like, both of these things can be true on both sides, and it doesn't have to be a tearing down contest that benefits nobody. I mean, if anything, I suppose we could be more aware of how apparently we're not building women that are suitable to really help men, and men that are suitable to help women, such that each feels relatively satisfied in the marriage and dating pool. Sorry, my dog will stop, I hope, soon. So, is there things to work on? Are the things that are like very sobering and negative? Yeah. But I don't know that the painting of 50% of the population is horrible by default, like this tainted with the original sin of being a man or a heterosexual man or whatever. Is that going to go somewhere good? I don't know. Doesn't seem like it. Anyway, maybe that's enough for this one. It was a little rambly, a little bit messy. Trying to think it through. But thanks for listening. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you next time.